I hope so.
It's always really exciting to be taking the next steps with a book. It's kind of like every single one is its own project. So
Mm.
thank you for joining with me today, Alicia Thompson. You are going to
Thank
be one of our fantastic workshop holders. So this is the first time the Logan Writers Festival will be hosting workshops. So we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of what everyone can accomplish as an author and the skills that they need to succeed in Logan. So I'm really excited that you put your hand up so fast to be part of the festival. Now, your book, Something Else, is one I haven't yet got my hands on. So please tell me a bit about Something Else.
Something Else is a rural-based love story. It's really me writing what I know, as I was just having a chat offline with you about. Lots of rural personalities, rural setting, rural issues, city versus country. I've grown up as a country girl, so grown up with hearing in my ear people complaining about city attitudes and not understanding and all of that sort of thing. And then I went and lived in the city and got to see the other side of things. So hopefully I've got a balanced perspective in it, but the driving force of the story is it's a love story. And the protagonist is isolated, prickly. He's really struggling to run a farm in the middle of a drought. And he's got some trauma in his background, and he meets this new person and they become friends, and they really click on a deep level. They've got things in common. They've both got trauma in their past, and they both reach out to each other. And this relationship goes to a place he never dreamed of, and it impacts on him in ways that he couldn't dream of either. And it's quite revolutionary for him. So there's quite a journey and an arc in the story, and there's some nice subplots going on. But yeah, it's been classified as romance. And romance these days on Amazon, I believe, has a very strict definition of happy ever after. So technically speaking, my book isn't really quite classified, although I think it's a happy for now. So, but you know, when you're a beginning author like I am, classifying yourself as literature only is very hard to attract readers. So the romance tag has been used by my publisher to attract readers. And look, I think it is a romance in the traditional sense. There's definitely a romantic element. But look, I'll let people read the blurb on the back and they can decide for themselves.
It kind of sounds a bit like country drama from what you were saying earlier. And I think that romance has so many subtags to it. You've got all of the different relationships that can be part of it, as well as all the different elements. So you can have fantasy, you can have urban, you can have historical. So I think romance in itself, even though it follows a fairly set beat line, you can have so much variety within that. And there's always room for romance authors, because romance readers are absolutely voracious. There's something about romance that it's something that you can just not stop. when you're
like
reading
eating
it,
chips, isn't it?
like eating chips, and you're like, oh, the recommended serving size is one handful, but then a massive bag is just gone in like half an hour.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, because, you know, as a teenager, I was pilfering my mother's Mills and Boons, and they're very
Yes.
formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I suppose if you look at certain genres like chook lit, which I don't hear that category anymore because I think it's grown out of that disrespectful title. But you've got
What's chocolate? I haven't heard
chook,
that.
chook lit as in chickens, chook
Yeah.
lit as in country romances.
Oh,
Uh,
I love my
and so
chooks.
yeah, that's right. And we've got so much of that happening in Australia now. I've never heard that really since, and I think it's because it's been given a lot more respect and gravitas than it was at that disrespectful time. And it was just, oh yeah, you know. You've got writers like Maya Linnell, Penny Janou, Pamela Cook, and they've all put a great deal of depth in those stories. They're not just, you know, your typecast stories. And as you say, romance readers turn up to festivals. They don't buy one book, they turn up with a basket.
Oh yeah,
you know?
I've seen them walk out of the Lifeline Book Fest with a trolley.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, as you say, they're easy reading, and they're addictive, and that's fabulous. Although my personal opinion is it would be probably difficult, well, I'm speaking for myself, to recall the plot line or the characters of any of those romances that I've read, not to put them down, but because happiness doesn't lodge in your heart as much as it is. Like Tolstoy said that all happy families are alike and all unhappy ones are unhappy in their own way, right? So I think a happy romance sort of blends in with all those other happy stories, and you think, oh yeah, married happily ever after, had the kids, whatever. But those stories, and there's less people willing to do it, those stories that have a tragic outcome or there's a tragic element, I think they lodge in your heart like a splinter and you never forget them. And I would challenge anyone who's read The Time Traveller's Wife as an example to forget those last few. I know. If I want to cry, I read the last 3 pages of that book and it never fails. It's so beautiful. And another one that a lot of people may not think of as a love story is Brokeback Mountain. And
yes, of course.
And lazy shorthand for my book, I would say, look, it's an Australian Brokeback Mountain.
I love it.
And that's another story that I think you cannot, especially with the movie, you know, when Ennis pulls out the shirt and sees the shirt that Jack wore, and you just, it's just heart-rending. And it's so understated.
It really talks, that one in particular. So, oh my gosh, just so many points from everything you've said so far. I think firstly, people always nearly infantize romantic literature and things that women primarily enjoy. And that's just a historical thing. And it's
absolutely,
because
I could talk for hours on that myself. Yep.
Because we get so excited about something, we're so passionate about something, and we kind of, it starts to become part of us very easily. And so it's seen as dangerous, or it's like stops us from being able to be controlled, or it puts ideas in our heads. And that's exactly what we want, but it's not what helps with keeping everything subdued. And then secondly, I was saying that the romance, the reason that you very rarely remember the characters in a romance is, I think, because we project ourselves into those roles. More often than not, women will remember the male counterpart, or, you know, the romantic interest counterpart, because I feel like they've put themselves in the shoes of the protagonist. And that means that the protagonist was them all along. So they didn't need to remember the name or the character traits because they were them. But they definitely remember the sexy hunk on the other side of it.
That's true, actually. I can remember some males out of the Mills and Boones I've read. So yes, you are right. You are right.
I think it's really clear when you see things like Twilight. Everyone used to say, like, as a teenager, I grew up with Twilight. And when it finally became more real, when you found out that Bella was really a very blank cardboard character. So you had all of these young girls who had like no empathy for anyone else except for themselves. And they were able to project themselves onto this very blank and bland character, which is what made the books popular, is basically a self-insert sort of romance. And then you've got Brokeback Mountain, where I'm not sure how, it's been a long time since I've read that one, but I'm not sure how that it doesn't really work like that, but it's nearly like you're watching two of the favorite things that you like as a heterosexual woman or a bisexual woman, and you're seeing an element of softness and compassion and love between two men, so it feels like double that for you. Purely
That's an
speaking from the reader's perspective entirely.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it, because I'm just talking to a friend of mine actually who's talking about going through a transition in her sexuality, and we were talking about some issues last night, and I said, yeah, really strange when I wrote this book, because I was definitely in the protagonist David's shoes in terms of I fancied Martin and I was imagining, you know, the scenes with him. But I wasn't imagining being a woman sleeping with him. I was imagining being a man sleeping with him. And that was a completely different energy and dynamic. And, I wonder how other people will feel reading it, because one thing I have figured out is that gay literature generally, and I'm looking at my publisher's website, NineStar Press, as a key example, is written by women and is read by women. And going back to what you were saying about female readers, I think there is a situation, I mean, I think it's well known that men tend to gravitate to authors with male names.
Yes.
And the classic example of that is J.K. Rowling not publishing as Joanna Rowling. There was a very distinct reason for that, and they wanted to attract young boys as readers. Now, I think women are more empathetic. They've grown up reading a lot of books by men, and you look at the classics, they were much more written by men, because women, of course, needed an independent income or no children to write. So they're few on the ground. So we've all adjusted to reading men and reading about men being women or men being men. But I think women are also much more empathetic in the way they operate, and they can put themselves into the shoes of a man, a woman, a child. Look at Kill a Mockingbird. Or an animal. They can be a dog, whatever. Women are very flexible with that. So when I've said to women, you know, this is an LGBT story, it's a romance between two men, the reaction's been, no problem, show it to me, I'd love to see it.
Yep.
Whereas men are a bit, oh, you know, I don't normally read this kind of thing, you know. It's all very cagey, and, oh, what'll people think if they see me reading this? You know, quite different attitudes to reading. Of course, all men are not like that. I've had some very positive reviews from men, and some of them always start off with, I don't normally read this kind of thing, but, which is great, because you know you're going to get a reasonable review because they've been surprised by enjoying it. But I do think that's very interesting that women are so open to reading that literature and that they want to read more of it. When I was in country towns going to some libraries, some women said to me, gee, I'd love to see this, more of this. There's not enough of this, because women who have children in this situation want more information or knowledge of what it's like to be in that situation. And I thought, gee, that's really quite interesting. And I also had early days, I think he might be a bisexual man, but he wrote to me on one of the websites and said how he was going through a particularly bad time, and he lived in a rural area. And he said that my character David just helped him through a really dark time, and he goes back and reads my book on a regular basis. He found it really touched him deeply. And to know that you've touched someone like that and been able to reach out, I think is incredibly powerful.
Oh, that is why we tell stories. That's like the fundamental reason of telling stories, and it just gives so much weight as to why different representation is so important. Because when I was younger, all representation was bloody boys. So all the heroes were boys, and so what they now call gender bending was something I did constantly because I wanted to be in the position of the hero. And so the moment that there was a young blonde protagonist, young female blonde protagonist, I was all over it. And if I'm like that, I know that there's like every other child is likely to be the same. They want to see someone that looks like them, that feels like them, and that has those same elements going through them, whether it's cultural, sexual, just physical identity, and even upbringings as well. So different socioeconomic representation is so critical. And for me, when I hear things like this, when I hear that readers are so thoroughly touched by this representation and by someone being brave enough to write this, because for a long time we've seen such a black hole in this area of the market. No one's had the courage to write it, either because, you know, we're not men, but we want to, we want to write these things, or because we're frightened of the criticism that will come through with it. And so having that representation, I always think about it, and it's a common term for it as well, is it's purely suicide prevention. It helps people find something within themselves that makes them feel seen and makes them feel heard. And that is a blessing that any storyteller can give to the world.
It's interesting what you say, because I was thinking of the books that I read when I was growing up, and I didn't really expect to find any 6-foot redheads running around in literature. Not that I was 6 foot when I was young, but I was very tall as a youngster.
You needed some
I
Scottish books.
Felt very unusual. Look, there's redheaded protagonist girls out there. No, certainly are. You know, Anne of Green Gables, Little Green School. They're out
Anne of
there.
Green Gables is one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah, but the thing I was more interested in personally was the characteristics of the girl. I wanted to read about girls that were a bit bolshy, that wanted to do something different, that they weren't these simpering young ladies. I mean, this is what I find frustrating.
You wanted them to have
Dickens.
some gall.
Yeah, and I don't know, I didn't really care what she looked like. I was more interested in, well, you know, has she got a backbone? Is she going to do something strong and interesting? Is she going to compete with the boys? You know, that was actually more what I was after. And, you know, at a very young age, someone gave me a copy of Enid Blyton's Naughty Amelia Jane. And I thought that's probably the beginning of everything.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, well, I just wanted someone who did something and I suppose it was about getting attention too, but doing something like the boys did, you know. I mean, it was all very well reading about what boys did, but I wanted to see girls do that, you know. I wanted them to have the limelight. And, you know, I think there wasn't enough of that when we were growing up, and there's certainly more now, obviously.
No, it's you know what, I am really glad to be in the time of information that we're in, because we do get to see that. And there's always places where we need more of it, but the fact that we have access to do these things and to publish these works in so many different places, I think it's just so important. It's so incredible. So what have you
there's
got?
more openness to, as you said, there might be people writing it, but whether people are receiving it is another thing. And that fear of like, when I put this out there, I just thought, you know, this isn't the sort of book my friends or my relatives would have expected me to write. And it's quite out there, you know. And I ran it by my mother and a lot of people to see what sort of reactions I would get, particularly as I put a few personal things in there that are my life and impact on other people in my family and my near circle. And I've had very positive reactions, which was great. A lot of people probably weren't comfortable with the gay sex scenes, and I understand that. But that's a small component of the story and the plot. And I haven't made it too in your face, I hope, because it wasn't the point of the story. It's the vehicle for telling a bigger story.
Yeah. No, it's an element of what needed to be shown. And honestly, there are so many people that would skip straight to that part.
Well, mine are very short, so they'll be disappointed.
So now that you've got something else out, are you looking at writing anything new?
Well, something else was actually put aside in frustration. Something else came along because I put another novel aside in frustration. In fact, I've just completed the 9th draft of it now. It's a rural crime novel, a dual timeline, and I've been writing it for about 14 years now. And I took it through my master's. It's been through many classes. And I wish I had got it out earlier because, of course, we're in this middle of this tidal wave of Australian bush noir Australian crime noir, and it would have been great if I had it out already, but I'm giving it to my manuscript assessor probably this afternoon or Monday, and I've really lucked in. I've got a manuscript assessor who's quite experienced. Kate Goldsworthy has done work. She's worked on all 4 of Sarah Bailey's crime novels. She's done some work with Chris Hammer and various others. So I'm thrilled to be working with her, but I'm also, of course, biting my nails that, you know, she's going to tell me it's trash and worthless and don't bother, or the amount of work to fix it up is going to be so monumental, I'll just stick it in a drawer for 5 years and forget about it. But I did have something else reviewed by a manuscript assessor, another very experienced lady called Nicola O'Shea, and she gave me a lot of feedback, and it took me a while to address it, because sometimes you get told confronting things that are hard to deal with, because you get locked into a way of thinking about your book, and someone looks at it from this angle and says, well, but what about this? You're not dealing with this, or you need to manage this. And that can be quite, it's like turning a battleship around, because you've spent so long with this story and you're locked in, and someone's saying, well, this part's not working. And that can be really difficult to go around. And you were talking about growth and resilience earlier, Rhiannon. Well, if you don't have the resilience to bounce back from that kind of feedback and respond to it, well, you're not going to grow. And you're also not going to meet the requirements of the contemporary reader. Like, I'm worried that with 14 years, my contemporary reader for this story has changed dramatically over the time. And I now have to look at the audience again and say, well, hang on, who am I writing this for now? Because 14 years down the track, it's not probably who I was writing for before. And
it's very possible.
You know, and what's in the market's changed, you know. I mean, I'm looking at competing with Jane Harper and Margaret Hickey and Candice Fox and whoever, whereas before weren't so many female crime writers back then. It might have been more the male writers like Peter Temple and Peter Corris and that sort of thing. So things have changed, the market's broadened, and the receptiveness, I think, has changed. And I've also got another crime novel going. I've got First Draft happening, and very similar lane to this other one, not dual timeline, but it's set half in London, half in Australia. So when I'm traveling in the next couple of months, I'm going to be researching the settings for that. Their settings I know very well, but I need to go back and get up to date with what they're like now. My murder is likely to occur on Hampstead Heath, and there'll be some activity around there, but there's a lot of travel to Australia as well. So keeping that Australian flavour alive, which is what I like to write about.
Oh, wonderful. That's fantastic. Oh, that's so exciting to hear how much you've got in the works. Sounds absolutely fantastic. I always think, though, that when I never think of other authors as my competitors, because they can't write fast enough for the readers to read and completely ignore my stuff. So I think it's the same for everyone. Romance, it gets pretty full, but like we said, romance authors are voracious, and I've seen romance readers are voracious, and I've seen them go through about 2 books a day as a point of pride. And I think that a lot of readers, the more they read, the happier they feel, and so there's always room in the market for more, as far as I'm concerned.
Isn't it funny, that thing about quantity versus quality? Like, you see it in book clubs and things all the time, saying, how many books do you read a day or a week or whatever? And I think, why does that even matter?
You know what? I can understand that it's a point of pride, but it's more that I want the story faster. The whole Del Toro Quest series, when I was in primary school, I read through all of those in about a week, and I think there's, like, for the first one, a good 8 books or like 12 books or something like that. And for me, it was really just like, I need this in my eyes right now. And so they get so swept up in the story, and they don't want that wave to ever crash, so they keep reading to ride that wave on and on.
You're probably not old enough. I had to suffer reading Harry Potter. I raced through the first 4 books, and of course there was nothing after that.
No,
and I was devastated. It was like I had to wait for her to write them.
I'm the same age as the actors, and so when I was in year 4, the fourth book was out, and I had to wait about 5 years for the fifth book to come out. What felt like
so you
5
did have to
years.
wait.
Yeah, I had to wait as well. And being a child, Harry Potter was my world when I was growing up. I would go around and my grandma sewed me a cloak that I still have somewhere, and I'd go and make wands and all sorts of things. So me and Harry Potter have a long history, and I feel like a lot of the lessons shaped me as a person today,
But
particularly
I
being
did
critical of the
think when I
media.
was reading it, it would be marvelous to be a child today and be able to read all 7 together, in a row. But that sense of having to wait and the wonder of how it was going to go. And I remember all the talk at the time, they were saying there'd never been anything like it since Charles Dickens had written The Curiosity Shop. And there was a crowd on the dock in New York demanding of the ship that landed, is little Nell dead? And they managed to keep it all under wraps about what happened in the last book. And I think that was just extraordinary. It's a little bit like this phenomena with book talk. I mean, it's internet, but it's actually encouraging physical reading. So all those people that are saying the book is dead and it's gone, it's an acronym and all the rest of it. There's so many things keeping it alive, and all this rebirth with young people reading through TikTok, and it's become cool again. I just think, wow, it's so exciting as a writer, because you get told there's thousands of books coming out every week, and you just think, oh, how's mine ever going to get noticed? But I think, like you just said, Rhiannon, and the people that read romance, and I think crime fits in there too. You go into Guinness
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's not just one shelf of crime, there's rows of crime, and you've got all the genres of crime and the genres of romance. There's so many subgenres now. And I think that's so encouraging that you can fit in. Whatever you're writing will find a home somewhere, and you will find an audience. And you might be able to steal people away from other subgenres,
You just let them put their toe in your genre's waters to see if they like the temperature.
Yeah, well, see, my crime book is because they say you've got to have something that sets yourself aside, and I think I originally thought rural setting was going to be what set me aside. Well, forget that now, because they're all like that.
Cozy mysteries.
That's right, and I've got a ghosty supernatural element in both of mine, and they're similar. And it's not overwhelming in the story, but the victims are wanting justice, and they're restless spirits, and neither of them have been found. So
I like that.
Those spirits are wanting to be found. They want to be they want closure. So the story's about not completion in a matter and tying that loose end up. So they're both cold cases, and they're both having to be discovered as to what happened. And when you find the body, that tends to reveal certain clues about how it got there and who did it and all the rest of it. So both of my new books are in that vein. So I'm hoping that might tap into something a little different, and I might create my own genre a little bit there.
That sounds very cool. Speaking of talking, though, what is your topic? Please let everyone know what you'll be workshopping at the Logan Writers Festival.
Well, I'm going to hopefully be talking to some younger people who might be writing their own YA fiction, but really I'm going to focus on kickstarting a novel and looking at I do a session on finding the plot, where I talk about structure of a novel, but I think that's more for sophisticated writers who've got a lot of progress happening, although I think it's helpful to understand the different structures you can work in a piece of work. But I would like to do some exercises with readers about utilising their 5 senses. Beautiful. Because I think that is something incredibly important that you often don't realise you're reading in a book. If you can place someone in a scene and you can tell them what it smells like and what it sounds like and any textures, there's subliminal things that you remember later. The visual things, maybe not so much. But if you tell someone that certain music was playing, or there was a smell of a smoking barbecue and burning prawns, or whatever, that's something, if you bring it back in the story later, it's a trigger. It's very powerful. And I use that quite a lot in my travel journals to bring a scene to life. It puts the reader in the scene. So I've got some exercises about how to do that. And another exercise that I hope I have time for is about how objects tell their own story. You can have, it's a show not tell kind of scenario where you might show the change in object through a novel, and the journey that that object makes actually tells its own story without you saying anything.
Oh, I love that. I am such a big fan of show don't tell, but in beautiful symbolic ways as well. So for instance, when something is, shiny and new and fresh at the very start of a book, and then it's old and scratched and battered at the end of the book, it shows so much what has gone through the entire story, not just that object, but the characters too. So that symbolism, and it's very easy to put so much heart into an object as well. It's amazing what humans can do.
Yeah. And similarly, an exercise that can be a bit of fun for a writer is to, instead of describing the character, because of course when characters meet, they get described, and you don't want to be falling into that trap of, I looked in the mirror and described myself, because that's become such a cliche.
Oh, yeah.
But
it does show very amateur
someone,
writing.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's worth trying it to see how it works for you, but it's a bit like saying I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That's a horrible cliche, and I think a lot of people don't even realize it's a cliche. I just read a recent crime novel where it wasn't used once, it was used twice, and I was like, oh, the editor, where was she? But back to what I was saying, when you meet someone, if they're in a room of theirs that they have put their stamp on, it's a wonderful thing to describe the room, because the room is a proxy to the person, and the room can give away clues that the person themselves wouldn't. And that's often very useful in a crime novel, for example, because those clues are just lying around and they give away things that you wouldn't otherwise see. And the reader gets to construe that for themselves. You aren't telling them to think anything. And one of the things I was told in my master's by Deborah Adelaide was, don't over tell the story, don't over describe it, because you are stealing that from the reader. They want to write the story with you. And if you tell them every last detail, you're going to bore them to death, because you're giving them no opportunity to write part of that themselves. So when you go back and you read something like, I don't know, Hemingway is probably an extreme example, and you say, look, describe that character. Well, yeah, that's another way. And you say, describe that character for me, and you do. And I say, okay, now go back and see what the writer actually told you about the character. And some people can be quite shocked and say, oh my God, where did I get that he had blonde hair? There's nothing here to say he's got blonde hair, or whatever.
And then they see the movie adaptation and lose their heads.
Well, that's another matter. But I think the fascinating thing is that you can be told so little. And like in my book, I don't actually describe David very much at all. I put in a few very small snippets. And in my head, he's a very complete physical character. I can tell you all about him. But the character that my readers will have in their head will be someone very different. And that's a wonderful thing, to think a few key factors and his dialogue and his personality will completely construct something different in however many readers' minds. So David exists in my mind as this, but he's existing in very different forms in other people's minds. And that is really a mind-blowing thing, I think, as a writer, to know that you've done that.
That's absolute magic. Oh, wonderful. I am so excited to have you come to the Logan Writers Festival and give your talk. I think that all of the students that come on the Friday, which is when you will be presenting, will get so much out of it. I think it, like, not only your studies and the experience that you've had, but also just how passionate you are about your writing is really going to shine through, and they're going to get so much out of it. So thank you so much for coming to chat with me today, Alicia.
Thank you. And even though the festival's quite a way away, I've been excited about it since you invited me. And I think that was quite some time ago now. And
Yes.
and I do love teaching, and I do love talking about writing. If you didn't make the mistake, but if you ask me about what I'm reading and what books I like, I will talk till the cows come home. I just can't talk about it enough. So I do love doing classes because I feel like I've got my own tribe coming to talk to me. So it's a lot of fun, and I hope whoever comes to hear me talk gets some value out of it. So I'm looking forward to meeting whoever comes. That'll be fantastic.
It's going to be so exciting. Well, you have a lovely day and have a lovely trip. One of the reasons we're doing Alicia's interview so early is because she's going away for a few months. Whereabouts are you going to?
I'm
said
going
London?
going to Netherlands and France, and the majority of the trip is going to be Scotland coming down through England. And the novel locations that I'm exploring, there's a couple in northern England and Scotland, and quite a few around London. And I'm also treating myself to going down to Lewes and Rodmell, which is Virginia Woolf territory. And I'm going to walk
wonderful.
around doing her walks, because I've read all her diaries, and I'd love to go to Monk's House and those locations, and Cambridge, which is famous for its bookshops, and Wigtown in Scotland, which is a book town, and it's got 16 bookshops. So I've got 32 kilos in my luggage allowance. Throwing out clothes is just, yeah, I'm a bit worried. I am a bit worried. I might be sending a test home.
Post it back to yourself.
Look, and I love to keep the books that I read. I have to, especially ones when I'm traveling, because they bring back the trip to me. So yes. It could be an expensive trip. And I'm going to go to Shakespeare and Co in Paris, so that's another dangerous place.
I used to work on cruise ships, and I had 2 big suitcases. I had already stopped off in Australia and dropped all my stuff off that I could, and then had another like 3 months left on, or 3 or 4 months left on the cruise ship. And then came back around and still had 2 big suitcases, a backpack, a handbag. And because I worked on the cruise ship, the flight attendant who was giving me my initial tickets to like get me home just looked at me, and she looked at all my paperwork, and she was like, "Oh, you're a bit over," because we both saw the weight, and I think I was about 15 kilos over. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to get home to Australia. I just finished work, and I've been on a ship for 8 months." And she just kind of looked at me, looked at the bags, and then put a heavy sticker on it without any number. And just let me go on. She was a gem.
You found a friend.
I did. She understood.
That would have been so expensive if she'd charged you.
She was
and
the
books,
nicest person. I think it was in Barcelona, actually. I think I got off in Barcelona and had to go to the airport from there.
Yeah. Look, I try to buy thick, big books so that they keep me going longer, and I don't have to buy lots and lots of books. That's my preference. But you just never know what you're going to find, do you?
No.
And if I go to secondhand shops, I'd like to buy the collection of Virginia Woolf's. I think there's 6 of them books of letters, because once I got through the diaries, I wanted the letters. And if they're hardcover and I find them, I'll be buying them, because they're really hard to get in a decent collection online. And yeah, that's busting my limit twice over immediately if I find them.
It's carry on. Don't even worry about it. It's carry on.
They will be carry-on. They'll be stuffed down my underpants and into my bra.
You just strap them around your stomach, and it just was, travel weight.
They'll think I'm a what do you call it, a suicide bomber, because I have them all over me.
No. Oh no. Okay, maybe don't do that.
Dear,
just post them back to yourself.
I can see it.
I swear it's just books.
It's just books, really.
Thank you so much.
The only thing that's going to explode is my knowledge.
Yes, I love it. Oh, thank you so much for meeting with me today, and I will see you with the rest of Logan in September.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, Rhiannon. It will be great.
Yeah, me too. All right, I will see you later. Have a great week. Have a great trip.
Thank you.